Anytime going through the demo, we try to make these interactive. So if you do have some questions or want to dive in a little bit deeper, please feel free to stop me and ask questions. I totally welcome that. Otherwise, it's just an hour and a half of hearing myself talk. So, and then it's kind of hard to understand if I'm hitting the mark for you guys as well. So obviously, our goal here is to make this as useful as possible for your purposes. So that's our goal today. Like Kevin mentioned, I'm going to go over, kind of an overview of Business Central. Not going to dig a lot into the navigation stuff like I normally do, because I think we want to see more transactional. We want to see the effect in the general ledger and how we can see those activities. So that's really where we're going to focus today. Without further ado, let's jump right in Business Central here. So I logged in through my Office 365, and here are my menus. I can navigate the system here. My finance activities are in the menu there, cash management, sales, purchasing. So we're going to spend some time in those areas today, each one of them a little bit differently, hoping to give you a good feel for how transactions process through Business Central. So when Janelle was processing the CRM or the customer engagement information, there is a link over into Business Central. So some of the documents out of the box, there's a connector that is included. It keeps customers and items in sync across the two platforms. So between Business Central and CRM, we have that link, and that basically keeps those things in sync so we can see some activities between the applications. One application that is shared and is very powerful, and I'm going to start off with this side of things. I'm going to go into Outlook, which has a very strong integration into Business Central. And I want to show you kind of a real life scenario of how Outlook and Business Central really interact, and it creates, or it makes Outlook a very useful tool when we're interacting with our customers or prospects, vendors even. So I'm going to just kind of jump in here. So I'm in my Outlook. I'm in the Office 365. This works pretty much the same in the desktop version. So let's just jump in. I've got an email here staged up, right? Because it's a demo. So I staged up this email, but it's a very basic email from Brian Leally, and it says, hey, I'd like to renew my membership. That's all it says, right? So this person is asking to renew their annual membership with our association, so we're definitely going to do that. Well, without having to go into Business Central, I can start initiating activities right from the email. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the ellipsis over here, and I've got this Business Central link. And I can go and select new invoice because I want to invoice our customer for the membership fees. So I'll go ahead and select invoice here, and it's logging into Business Central and creating that live connection and drilling in and actually interrogating this email, saying, well, who is this from? Notice it's giving me some suggestions here. So based on this email, based on who it's from, and some of the information within the email. So notice it says, I would like to renew my membership. It doesn't say my annual membership. I'm not calling out an inventory item, a quantity, or anything like that. But notice what's happened over here. It's identified at least membership. So it says, hey, you know what? We have an inventory item or an item in our sales area that is a membership. So that might be what this person is referring to. So it gives me an option to bring that stuff in. Now, in the past, I've also purchased an Athens mobile chair or whatever that thing is, a desk or something. I'm not buying that today, so I can unselect this. But what this is doing is is expediting the creation of this sales invoice. So I don't have to key all this stuff in, it's doing it for me. So I'll go ahead and select the membership. Now I can also come over here and enter the quantity. We're just going to do one. So one membership, and I just accept those. And the end result for this process is an invoice over in Business Central. And I'm going to jump over there. All right, so we've got our membership, and that would be created right from this email. So I would essentially come in here and have this email or this invoice created. And now I can process through this membership request for this customer. Now, a couple of things I want to draw to your attention. There's several different aspects here that I also want to touch on. Let's say that we're tracking some of our grants, and maybe we've got a grant that we charge memberships to, or at least account the memberships to that particular grant. I've got my dimensions set up here. So I've got my grant and I've got some other programs that are related. I could charge this invoice to that grant to give me a full picture of maybe this is some income that we're receiving based on outreach that we put out. Maybe we're doing some advertising for some outreach to get the word out regarding a specific program that we have. And maybe selling tickets, or this membership is kind of the income for that grant. Well, I can track that by attaching the grant here and processing that through. So I'll go ahead and just select this federal grant, and that will pull through. So I can tag this transaction with a grant, which will later give me the ability to report on it. So I'm not doing anything other than just tagging it with that particular dimension, and then we should be able to process that through. Now, a couple other things we can do, say this was, and I think you guys are talking about using credit card processing or payment method for customers. We could send this through a payment method. So if we were taking a credit card over the phone, we have the ability to do that. I don't have anything like that set up in this demo environment, but we have the ability to use those applications. So, and Kevin, I guess you can expand on that if there's anything to add there.
Yeah, I mean, we're having the meeting tomorrow to get more into the scoping side of things and deciding which pieces we want to use or not. But we definitely do have a couple of different options for credit card processing. So we could be taking credit cards here. You could have credit cards stored at the customer level, you know, if you wanted to. You could also post the invoice, and then later they could pay it using the credit card, because the credit card processors that we use, it also has a portal where they could log into that portal and then pay the invoice, you know, a week from now or 2 weeks from now via their credit card.
Yeah, and there's an out of the box function too for those that don't use that, where I could actually email this invoice off. So I can go out and send this email, or excuse me, send the invoice to my customer. And it includes in that email, it can include like a PayPal link. So they could settle the invoice through PayPal if they wanted to do that as well. So there's a bunch of different options there. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to preview post this just to make sure it's going to go in case I missed anything. All right, looks great. So I preview post things a lot because it gives me a chance to look at it before it actually hits my ledger, right? So I can review, make sure it's hitting the right GL accounts. I love that feature in Business Central. And then if there was any errors in the entry, it would tell me that too. I could correct them and then move forward. But the thing I like about this, here is the GL effect of this entry. And you're probably going, wow, that seems like a lot of entries for one invoice. Well, what I've done here is on the item, because we want to spread out that cost, because it's an annual membership, we're actually deferring our cost out the next 12 periods, straight line depreciation for the cost of that particular membership due. So I have the ability to do that, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. We're seeing the entries. As I scroll down, you can see this bottom row here, which is for the $150. It's hitting my accounts receivable. So that's the AR side of things. And then each one of these, you can see the description for each entry, the November 2020 membership revenue, and it's posting that. So it's posting or creating the entries for the next 12 months and hitting my deferred revenue. So it's booking the original entry to deferred revenue, and then we're relieving a month's portion of that along the way for the next 12 months. So I just wanted to set that up as an example. I'm not sure if you guys actually defer that revenue or not, but this gives us the ability to do that. And we have that on both sides of the fence. You can do deferrals on expenses as well as revenue. So I've attached a deferral template to our membership dues just to demonstrate the ability to automatically run that. So I don't have to book, you know, accrual entries or deferral entries. It's all done for me based on me setting that deferral schedule to the item. Okay, so that membership has a deferral schedule associated with that item. So very cool stuff. So let's go ahead and actually post this now. So we've got our transaction and it looks good. We'll go ahead and post this. Yes, we do. And it's going to go ahead and now hit the general ledger. So at this point now, we just updated the customer's information. So that customer is now reflecting the activities of that invoice. Our general ledger now reflects those activities as well. So prior to that, it was just a sales invoice. It did not have any of that effect in the general ledger or on the customer. But now it has been posted. So now we have posted sales invoices. Those are the activities that actually update those records, so the customer and the general ledger. So here is that invoice. All right. So we've got the invoice out there. Let's say now we're going to receive the payment from the customer. In this scenario, we're going to actually take in a payment. So whether it be a cash check or they're calling me up over the phone, however we're doing it, we're going to go ahead and book a cash receipt for this. So we're going to settle this entry with our customer. And I'm just going to open up my cash receipts journal. I've got a batch out here that kind of gives some definition to that. It automatically puts in that I'm hitting my checking account. So I can simply come in here and put in my date for the receipt. And I'm going to identify this as a customer. And it's going to be a payment. So it's a customer payment. And now I just select my customer. So from here, I can put in that. Now I can also see what we're trying to apply it to. So I can pull up invoice here and I can search for the invoices for that particular customer. So when I pull this up, it shows me their invoices. And we're just going to pay the one that I just entered. But you can see here the due date. Anytime the date is red, that means it's past due. So we're late on receiving those payments. So that might be something to follow up with on our with our customer. And then this one is still current. So we're going to go ahead and just apply against the 150. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull that one in. And that's going to be our guy. So we're applying against that. Notice how it populated the amount for me. So now I'm applying the $150 to that invoice, and we'll go ahead and again, we can process this through. We can preview post it just to make sure everything looks great. And there it is. So I'm not getting any messages, so I'm good to go. I'll go ahead and post this through. So what this is basically allowing us to do is review that customer, review their entries, and post cash against that invoice. So I can do a batch of receipts as well. So I could fill the screen with multiple customers. I could put in a dollar amount. Maybe they didn't specify which invoice they want it applied to. They just want us to apply it to their oldest invoices and roll it through. I could then just enter a dollar amount, and based on the customer setup, if I have it set up to apply to oldest, that's what it will do until it runs out of money. So it'll go ahead and do those things for me. And I could preview that activity just to see what invoices are being applied to, so I can kind of get that understanding before I actually post that. Any questions on that process? So we created an invoice for our customer. We looked at a deferral template that kind of deferred that revenue out for the next 12 months for us. And in our general ledger, that's currently reflected. And then we received the $150 payment to settle up that invoice and looking at it there. Now I've got a bunch of dimensions out here, but let's focus on, like Kevin said, and like you're talking about, the grants dimension. Now think of me entering a journal entry. This would be one column in my journal entry for the grant. Now I can let's look at the value. So when I hit the drop down list for that particular grant column, I only have 2, but I could have a list of 30 different grants in here, right? And I can add to it. I can, add to it at any time. But This is where that information is housed. But it's one dimension for the grants, and then the values that become the drop-down list for me to select from are maintained within that dimension. So those are called dimension values.
At the end, we'll show you how that shows up on your balance sheet. once we've gone through some of the transactions.
And same thing with department. That's another easy one for people to kind of get their arms around. So if I look at my department dimension, the values in here are all my different departments. I've got my admin department, sales and marketing, I've got a bunch of different ones for demo purposes, but these would be all the different departments that we create our budget for, right? But that's all maintained in one dimension. So when I'm booking my entry, this is just one column and I define, all right, that's going to admin. That's going to that particular grant. I'm going to this location. Let me pull up a journal entry a moment, because I think that kind of helps lay it out, because that's directly affecting the general ledger. So I think that's a little bit cleaner to actually understand. So I'm going to just open up a journal entry. And what's nice about the journal entry screen is I can modify or move these fields around. But you can see here, I'll just kind of shortcut this. These fields over here, so I've got strategy, grant code, deferral code, business group, correspondent, producer. These are all dimensions. So department, right? So those are the dimensions that we were just looking at. So when I create an entry, I'll go ahead and just put in a very brief office supplies type of entry. So I'm going here and I'm charging these office supplies against a department because we budget and it's going against my admin department. So I'm tagging this transaction with the dimension. And then I've got some programs out here. So I've got foster care, outreach, and counseling. I'm going to say this is part of my outreach program, and that is associated with this federal annual grant that I received. So within that grant, we have a few different programs that we're dealing with, and it's outreach, counseling, and so I can charge it to not only the grant, but then I've got like a subcategory to my grant called programs, and I can charge it even more definitively to those particular categories. So in one entry, I'm able to tag the grant, the program, and my department to be able to report on. So now when I go at the end of the month, I'm reporting on, all right, how did our outreach program do as far as costs go? I can now see that part of that or that $1,500 was regarding the outreach program. Okay, so we had $1,500 of office supplies and against which grant, right? So my federal 2020 grant, again, $1,500 was charged against that. In the screen, visible at this level, I have the ability to drop 8 different dimensions on my screen. So when I'm doing data entry, I can do 8. Now, I'm not limited to just the 8. So let's say I want to hit one of the dimensions that doesn't fit on the screen. I can now go to my line and go to dimensions, and I can go further and add another dimension. Notice these are the 3 that I populated in the row, right? So I've already populated these. So this is where it goes beyond wherever you want, because notice I have more than 8 dimensions in here. That's more than 8. So if I wanted to target a strategy, just as an example, I would just select it from here and populate it, and I'm done. So the limit of 8 is display on the row. That's your limit. But I could add as many dimensions as I wanted. So I'm not limited by dimension at that point.
But in reality, it's rare to have a ton of dimensions.
It is. I mean,
it's more typical to have 1 or 2 or 3, and you may only have 1. You may only use dimensions for grants. You may not use dimensions for anything else. But that's part of the implementation process. Is we're going to spend a lot more time with you going through what you need to be able to track, what you need to be able to get out of it, what you need to be able to report on, all that stuff, so that we can configure it and set it up so that you get all that. We haven't done that. We just took a guess in a very short period of time to try to show you the flexibility, but in reality, we're going to deliver exactly what you need.
So we've cleared out the AR side or accounts receivable side of the fence. So invoice, posted that invoice, received the payment against it. We'll take a look at that customer real quick, just so that you get a sense for the customer lists in our environment. So I can look at them here. When I'm looking at this list, I can also look at it a little bit different. I can look at the tiles. So you can see some of my items actually, or my customers have images on them, and which makes it a little bit nicer to look at. But when I do look at the list here, what's nice about this, I can take this list and I can sort it. So if I want to know who's got the largest balance, maybe I want to look at this in a descending fashion, and I can see right here, here's my top, customers, and maybe I want to follow up with them. So I've got the ability to kind of manipulate this list and filter it. I can search through it to find my customers very rapidly and easily. And when I do highlight a customer, notice the pane on the right kind of gives me the details. I don't have to actually drill into the customer's record to actually see the activities that have taken place. So I've got great visibility to the information of that record without actually having to drive into it. Nice features there. So the customer record is shared. Not all items are shared between, but there are certain things that do come over, like orders. So if an order is created over in CE, that order is brought over into Business Central. So you would have visibility to that information here as well. So you would see those on both sides.
If your salespeople, like especially outside salespeople, are the ones entering the orders, that's typically where you would see them using the CRM side to create the order. And then we would, ship it and invoice it, fulfill it in Business Central. In organizations where it's not salespeople entering the orders, typically once they become a customer, you just create the orders directly in Business Central, and they can flow back over to CRM for visibility. But you typically would process them in Business Central. And you definitely would process the invoicing part of things in Business Central.
Right.
So tracking all the activities around a grant, around a prospective grant, around grants you've applied to and maybe got turned down, and doing all that kind of stuff would be best served on the CRM side, the sales, Dynamics 365 sales enterprise. And so that's what we've laid out as the proper solution for that. Tracking the financial aspects of the grants once you get it and you start having expenses against it. The financial side of managing those grants and tracking the expenses and tracking the balances, that would happen in Business Central. So basically, if it's a non-financial activity, it's going to happen and be tracked on the sales enterprise side. And if it's a financial activity, it's going to happen in Business Central, and they'll share information for some of that stuff. The sales side is set up for non-technical people to be able to add custom entities and create custom workflows.
Okay.
Whereas in Business Central, it would be a technical type person that does extensions, because with Business Central being a financial application and an ERP application, it has to adhere to certain rules in terms of, we're processing a financial transaction. We can't just create a custom entity and do whatever we want with it. It's got to adhere to financial standards. So it's more when you have custom processes and custom data that you're going to track. That's where we typically, that's non-financial data, that's where we typically would do it on the sales side, the CRM side, and then the financial aspect of those things can be done in Business Central, but it usually doesn't very often require customizations in Business Central. It's more of a configuration or doing things like setting up the dimensions to track the grants and stuff like that.
I think we talked a little bit about, last time we talked a little bit about using jobs or projects in the system to kind of manage some of the activities or events that you guys might perform. So if we have an event, this gives us an ability to accumulate costs, so we can actually see at any point in time where are we at with specific costs related to an event that we're putting out there. So there may be, venue expenses, there might be advertising, or if we're putting together, putting food and things like that, any cost related with that particular event, we can accumulate so that later when we get done with that event, we can identify, hey, did the cost that we incur make sense for the benefit that we put out there? So that's one thing that I want to jump into for the moment. So we're going to take a quick look at a job that we have out there for our membership drive, and we'll just talk through that a little bit, and then we're going to process some transactions and come back and look at it again to see the effect of those transactions on our particular job here. So here is my job. Now, I've got a very basic layout. Again, we took a brief look at this last demo, but just to kind of reiterate what we have here. So we've titled it our membership drive and created a budget. So we've got some budget out here for the venue. So we're renting a venue, and we've got some advertising budget out there of $5,000. So first thing that we do, we establish the budget, and then we can report against that. So you can see we already have some actual cost in here. We can compare, hey, how are we running against our originally planned budget? Taking a look at that, one other nice thing about Business Central is with it being a cloud application, we have the ability, or actually it has an app that you can use to monitor things, keep track of information in the system. And as an example, the job is one of them. I'm going to go ahead and present to you real quick my iPad. So this is actually my iPad sitting here. So I've got the app up. So this is the Business Central app on my iPad, and you can see things look pretty familiar. So I'm going to go down to the jobs area here, and I'll click on that, and that will bring up our job list. So notice the job number that we have over in the screen here. That is our membership drive. So I'm going to go ahead and click and open up the membership drive. So imagine somebody who's managing or in charge of this event walking around at the event, and they, maybe we had ticket sales on here or something. They could actually see the activities happening as they're actually taking place on the screen. So they could sit here, and I'm going to scroll over a minute, and so they could be watching the cost continuing to rise, and maybe they go, oh, wait a minute, we need to stop. What's going on here? But anyway, they're going to have visibility on the application to see what's going on, and they could react to that. They could, monitor the activities as they're actually happening by using the app on an iPad. And this goes for any of the financial activities that take place in Business Central. The app is very powerful. You can look at pretty much anything. I can go to customer invoices. I can create purchase orders, sales invoices. So maybe I'm walking around and at this membership drive, and I run into a customer and they want to renew their membership. I could do that right from my iPad and create their membership invoice. I could email it to them right as I'm standing there talking with them. So the flexibility and the ability to do all these different activities is just so powerful. All right, so let's go back to our job. We talked about that for our event, and we have our membership drive going on. We've incurred some cost already. I do have an invoice out there. Let's go ahead and just pull this up real quick. So again, we've got our cost here. Right now we're at $20,250, and we've incurred advertising and the venue expense. So I've got another invoice out there. So now
So that's how you track any expenses to a particular project, or job is the word they use, but it's really your projects or your events. So as you put on events, all the expenses to put on that event would all be captured under that job, and each individual expense could get charged to a grant, or it may not be able to be charged to a grant. You mentioned that as an option as well, that some expenses can be charged to grants and some expenses cannot.
Right.
So that's kind of the cross-reference there. Is the event is the job, the individual expenses may go to one grant or a different grant or to no grant at all.
So I've got a purchase invoice in here for Nod Publishers. I'm going to pull this up. They did some advertising for us for our membership drive. So I've got the invoice here. Couple things I want to point out. So on my purchase invoice, so this is where we would enter any of our bills, right? We got vendors, we've got bills. Here's the invoice that I'm entering. I'm going directly to a general ledger account, my advertising expense account. I am identifying the job. So I'm charging the job because this is advertising for our membership drive, and I want to make sure that this gets accounted on our membership drive job. Okay. And then on the job, remember I had those lines breaking down the actual accounts. So here are the tasks, I should say. The first one was the venue, and then task 2000 was for advertising, right? So on my job tasks, I can select, and that's what I'm doing here. I'll select advertising. So I want this 3,000 units of whatever we're selling at, or not selling, but purchasing at 25 cents. So maybe these were flyers or something. We're purchasing that. I'm charging that job and that task. So now I'm kind of categorizing this expense right within the job. So I've got total visibility. I'm not just looking at, well, that event cost us $50,000 and now I got to go drill into all of my invoices to try to figure out what happened, right? This gives me the ability to really break down those costs within the job itself. Now I've got visibility to where those activities really took place in the job. So I'm going to scroll over even further, and what are we going to see? We're going to see dimensions, right? So not only am I charging this cost, like Kevin was mentioning, I'm charging it to the job, but I'm also able to identify these costs against a grant. So when I'm doing my grant reporting, and maybe we've won a $100,000 grant or a $500,000 grant, it was awarded to us. We need to track the cost against that grant. Well, this is how we can do that. Now I can identify this $750 is being charged against this grant. So of that $500,000 grant, now I can deduct the $750, and now I know how much I have left for that grant. So that's why we're identifying the dimension here. We can now attach this cost against that grant, and that gives us the visibility, and now I can report on that. And again, we're going to outreach and admin department. I've got all those things going on here. So this is really doing a couple different things. I'm accumulating cost in an event to see how much that event cost us. And I'm also charging these costs against the grant. So I'm doing two things here that are very important for us to understand what's going on in our organization. So let's go ahead and post this, and we will look at the effect of these after we post. So let's go ahead and post, and has been approved and released. So, I'm going to pause here a moment. There is actually an approval process in this environment for posting an invoice. It will stop and say, hey, you can't post this invoice. It must go for approval. So I would enter in this invoice. It would stop. I would request approval. So I would enter it and request approval. The approver is going to get an email and stating that there's something waiting for their approval. They'll go ahead and act on that, approve it, and then they can post it at that time, or they can send it back to the original user who will then be able to post it. There's a workflow in here, and at this point, it's bringing up this message because it's just going to go ahead and do it. But I'm my own approver, so that's why it's kind of skipping all the steps in between. But it is actually going through an approval cycle, and you can see here purchase invoice 107235 must be approved and released before you can perform this action. So I'll request approval. So here we go. So I'm going to send the approval request, which should go to myself. So now that approval request has been sent. And let me just see here. It's been released. I'm going to try to post it and see if it will go. Do you want to post? Yes, there it goes. All right. So since I'm my own approver, it allowed me to post it and then go through. So I want to look at this. And the reason I want to look at this is I want to show the approvals. I want to show you that there's an approval trail here. So again, I submitted it. Brian Leali submitted it. And the approver was Brian Leali. Now, if there was a back and forth, it was rejected or whatever, or if there is a time delay, what's nice is it shows you, hey, the date and time that you send it, and then it's telling you the date and time that it was approved as well. So you have full visibility of all the approval activities that have taken place on a document that does get sent for approval. So
this is optional. This is up to you guys to decide whether you want to use it or not, but it was one of the things that was listed in your requirements document. So we can do it, or you can choose not to. It's up to you.
Exactly. Cool. All right. So now we've posted that invoice. We'll go ahead and take a look at that real briefly, and let's go back to our job real quick. And then in the end, we're going to look at the effect in the general ledger against the grant as well. So now we've got 21,000. Remember, we hit our advertising. Right from here, I can go, well, what is making up this $6,000? I can drill into this cost on our job to understand what's going on in our membership drive. So if I expand this a little bit so you can see, here is the invoice that we just booked, the $750. I can see where it went. It hit my GL account advertising expense and when it was posted. Now I can drill even further into this information from here. So I can go back to the entries themselves, and this will open up what took place in that general ledger. So you can see all the different entries that took place. It posted a purchase invoice. It booked a journal entry. There was some tax involved in that entry. And then my vendor ledger was updated. My detailed vendor ledger was updated. And then my job ledger entry, which we're looking at right now, was also updated. So it does a lot of things and updates a lot of records, but that is all visible. I can drill back to each one of those right from the entry. And again, I just looking at the job, I have the ability to drill back to the originating entry for this, any one of these transactions in here. So very cool. All right, I'm going to leave the job behind for now. So we're going to move on. So let's take that purchase invoice. So we've got that invoice out there. Let's go ahead and select that vendor, select that invoice for payment, and print the check and get that one cleared out for us as well. And we can see that Nod Publishers, if I go to the vendors here, we'll look at their account real quickly here. Nod, here's my guys, here's their balance. So I can drill into the balance and see what makes up that $18,000. I'll close this. Here's our remaining amount. Notice there's our $750, right? So that's the invoice that we just created. So let's go ahead and pay that invoice. Closing that out. So I'm going to jump over to my payment journals. So we're going to go through cash management and payment journals, and we will pay our Nod Publishers invoice that we have out there. So I'll go ahead and prepare this. So I'm going to select vendor payments so I can grab this. There's mine. Oh, what was the posting date on that? Yeah, I can just do that for today. That's fine. All right, I think that should do it. So here's our vendor. We got our $750. It's going to be a computer check, so we have that, and everything looks good. I'll go ahead and print my check. So I'm going to go check, print. It's going to ask what bank account I'm printing the check out of. Here's my checking account. It pulls in my last check number from my bank account. So whatever was used last, that's what it's going to use. And we'll go ahead and print this balance account type. Oh, I didn't. Oh, I forgot to drop something in there. Hang on one second. It's this guy. That should have been brought in the first time.
Yeah.
Here. All right, here we go. Let's print a check. Checking, that all looks good. Print, and it's creating my check. Here is the preview of the check. This is just the out-of-the-box format. There's like 4 different formats for the check that we have. This is the mostly unused check format. So, but anyway, we would print that. So we print that off to the printer on our check stock. Notice now we have a balancing entry. So it's actually posted the check. It has the check box over here that says the check has been printed. So that is all set there. And now we can go ahead and process this through. This will close out the documents for this particular document or for this particular vendor. So let's go ahead and post this and we should be all good. And there it goes. So now that invoice has been paid. So the vendor's balance has been reduced. Everything is all set there. So that kind of takes you from purchase invoice, posted that invoice. We talked about the approval processes that we can have in that step. We selected documents for payment, pulled in that invoice, printed a check for that, and then posted it through. So now that vendor, if we go back to the vendor record, you'll notice that his balance has now been reduced by that $750. So if we drill into this, it's just that those final 2 invoices making up his balance. So that's how we process and move checks through the system. Yeah, we've actually developed an application that you can do multiple signatures, and then you can have logic on it too. Second signatures required over 50,000 or whatever. Yeah, we do have that. Kind of went fast. When that was previewing on the screen, that is a PDF. Okay, so if you wanted them to kind of preview that PDF file, you could send it to them or have them preview the file. And then if everything looks good, they would just say, yep, go ahead, that's fine. And then you just pull up that PDF file and print to your check stock. So it doesn't have to be committed to checks at that point. And that would be a point where you could review those checks at, prior to actually posting them. That way, if they did have a change or something didn't look correct, you still have a chance to make a correction at that point.
You could also set up using one of the Power Apps, the workflow type Power App. You could set up something like that too, where it could go through a workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Even a Power App, if they just want to see specific information about who's being paid, you could just present them, certain information within a Power App, and then they could, maybe approve it from there too. So right. There's a ton of options on how you can manage that. All right, so moving on to the general ledger. So now we're going to kind of circle back into the grants and the visibility of what we've been booking against these grants, and how do we present that information from our general ledger and from account schedules, which we call our financial reports are called account schedules. So I'm jumping back over to finance, and let's just start right at the chart of accounts just for example. So from the finance, I'm going to go to my account schedules, and I've got 2 different reports out here, financial reports that are based on grant activities. So I've got one that shows budget information, and then I've got one that's mainly just what activities are taking place. So let's start with the grant balance activities. So from here, I can run the report and take a look at it. So I'm just going to go process overview, and I'm going to put in my dates here. So I'm going to kick this off from January 1, because that's my beginning of my range for this report. So this is a January through December type of report. I'll go ahead and let's expand this a moment, and I'll talk through what we have here. And I'm going to kind of shrink up some of these areas so you can see the report more. So you can see here.
Keep in mind here, I'm sorry to interrupt, Brian, but keep in mind here that this is something that would be created based on what you need.
Good point. What I'm showing here is a month by month. So this is January through December. And I've got my grants awarded. The scenario that I set up here is sometimes we receive a grant, we're awarded the grant, but maybe we don't receive the money. So maybe it's not a financial entry. They aren't just sending us a $500,000 check. They're saying, you've been awarded the $500,000 and we'll reimburse you for any costs that you have regarding that, up to $500,000 for that grant. So we want to put in the awarded amount. So this tells us, hey, what do we have available to create expenses against, right? Now that 500,000 may not be a financial entry. I can create a journal entry using a non-financial account or a statistical account, if you will. And that still gives me the ability to put it in a financial statement and record on this, because I'm not going to see this 600,000, value in my general ledger, but I do have it for reporting purposes against these expenses, because I want to see what I have left based on the expenses that are being charged against that grant. Just in general, think of this as an income statement. This is the awarded amount, what we have available to us to use. And then down below, we have expenses that we're incurring, and then we total those expenses. And then I've got a funds remaining, remaining grant funds balance here. And I can see that information. Then I just did a little summary of the same information. Here's my total grant. Here's all of our charges. Just in case this doesn't fit on one page, I just got a nice brief summary down here. Now, what's cool about this report, this is my across the board grants, meaning all my grants are in here. So if I drill into this, anything that I can hover on and has a line under, I can drill into it. I can see what grants are, what is making up this $600,000. So I can drill into this. I've got my two grants, right? So my federal grant and my Van Andel grant. So that's what's making up, and I'll scroll over, you can see the dollar amounts. So one's for 500,000 and one's for 100,000. So I can see that information. I understand what makes up that dollar amount. And so I'm looking at total grant and total expenses. Well, maybe I want to break that down a little deeper. Here's where the power of the dimensions come in, okay? Remember, I have my grant filter. So this is a dimension. Remember when we tagged that transaction with our federal grant? Well, when I filter this report, now I'm filtering to that grant, and notice it's the 500,000. And now I'm only seeing expenses that are relating to that grant. So I can really analyze this report, and by grant, I can see the different information. Now I also have locations regarding this grant as well. And I think I've got some expenses here. Notice on the northern aspect of this grant, I've got $2,800. So I've got expenses there for this grant in the northern location. And you can see if I had different programs, let me back this one out. And I think I've got our outreach program, for example. Remember, we hit that as far as the program underneath our grant. So I can grab my outreach here, and we'll go with that. And we should see the expenses that we incurred. This is some mileage that we've incurred, and across the board, we've got different expenses that we've been incurring across the board on this. And we can drill into these to get back to the original transactions. This is creating that visibility and the ability to really report by grant and any breakdown that we might need within that grant to help report back to show how did we perform on this grant, what restricted funds have we used. So we have all of that visibility. And I think on my other grant, I think it drives a little deeper into the locations and things. But you can see these are the dimensions that we were working with when we were booking the journal entries, when we were hitting our accounts payable with that purchase invoice. We were able to define the grant and the program on the line item for advertising. We could see that activity, and here are those activities in this particular report. So it gives us great visibility and functionality, and we can set this report up to report on many different grants and however we want to configure the dimensions and the dimension, relationships that we might have as we're creating those or setting up your dimensions. And this is able to drop out to Excel. I can pull, print this out to Excel and then further. A lot of times our customers, they're putting together a package, right, to go to the board with, and they'll use this report. They'll put it out to Excel, and that will become part of their package. They'll manipulate it around a little bit, putting different headings and titles and stuff on it, and that becomes part of their board package. This is a very frequent use of this type of report.
Yep.
Let me drop this out to Excel for a second. Whatever you see in the screen is the formatting that you get in Excel. So if I were to process this or post this out to Excel, or print, I should say, if I go here, I can export it. Let me see, I can print it. I'm going to print it, and we're going to send to Excel. Typically,
if you've got 10 or 12 different reports that you want to put into a package to give to the board, you can export them all, so they're all in Excel on different tabs that you then give them to them. But you could, for people like you that are using the software, you would just run the reports in the software itself.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
So it's when you need to provide that data to someone who doesn't have Business Central, you can export to Excel. And if you wanted to put, we could also do things, whether it's inside of Business Central or in Excel. You can do things where you can do a graph, for example, to show the types of expenses, in a pie chart or something like that. That can be done inside Business Central, or it can be done outside of Business Central, depending on who the audience is and who needs to see it.
So this is how it looks in Excel. And again, what's nice about this, a lot of times when you dump things out to Excel, they lose all their formatting. You have to readjust all the columns and everything. You can see this report is pretty much ready to go. It's just like it looked when I was in Business Central, pretty much. The bolds are bolded, underlines are underlined, and the columns don't have to be resized, which has always been a huge issue with putting things out to Excel. So this is presented actually very nicely without having to really do anything to it. That was really where I was going to wrap up with the financial statements or the account schedules for the grants, because I think that kind of brings back the information that we had.
I think the only thing we didn't discuss, I believe we showed it the first time, is the ability to do journal entries using Excel as well. So for example, your payroll software, every time you run, a pay period, most payroll softwares, you can download the resulting data from that payroll run into Excel. Well, then you can also then cut and paste from what they give you into a format, assign the dimensions if your payroll doesn't let you break it down by the grants or project codes or something like that. Most payroll systems will let you do things like have job codes or department codes of some sort. So you should be able to break those various different types of things into multiple pieces. But yeah, you can start a journal entry like he just did right here, open it up in Excel, and now you can cut and paste from what you get off of your payroll system directly into this spreadsheet, and then post it right back into Business Central.
Typically, payroll entries are rather large usually. So you can use this method. What's nice about this is it takes the exact layout of my screen, so I don't have to reconfigure everything. These columns line up exactly what's in your screen. And the nice part about that is, hey, my journal entry from my payroll company has this column over here. You know what? We can personalize our screen and make it match if we want to. And then it's kind of a one-for-one. But it's just as easy to say, all right, I'm going to copy these three columns. Here's my GL accounts. Here's my amount column. Paste that in here, and then bring that in. And then it's just a copy from here, paste back into the journal entry, and you're ready to go. So maneuvering between the two applications now just became very, very easy.
Yeah, you can even post it directly from Excel too. There's a second way to do it.
Yep. Yeah, you can edit this activity in Excel where it actually opens this up in a screen that you can manipulate, and then you can publish your changes and it will update this journal right from the Excel spreadsheet as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that covers everything we had indicated we would show. I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow about, to dial in on the scoping and understanding exactly what you want to accomplish. Phase one, I guess, is the way to put it. And then from that, we can get out the final proposal and hopefully things can work out and we can move forward.